Today on Inside Utah Politics, the race for governor. It's becoming a crowded field. Former House Speaker Greg Hughes is the latest to jump in. He's here to explain why he wants the job and where he stands on the big issues. Plus, the new year brings new leadership for Utah's capital city. We have reaction from Mayor Erin Mendenhall's inauguration and take a look at the initiatives she's getting to work on right away.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Good Sunday morning. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. The list of Republican candidates jumping into the governor's race is growing. Although we've known he was going to get in for a while now, former House Speaker Greg Hughes made it official during the week. He joins Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, Utah County businessman Jeff Birmingham, Salt Lake County Councilwoman Amy Winder-Newton, former Governor Jon Huntsman Jr., and former Utah GOP Chair Thomas Wright as the candidates hoping to get the party nomination in the primary election. Hughes joining us now to dig deeper into why he is making a run for the state's highest office. Thanks for being here. Appreciate having you.
Happy to be here.
Let's get right into it. What's your interest in this position?
So you're telling me there's other people in this race?
A few others.
What? I thought I was the only one.
And you knew that going in.
It is. It's true. So look, I think we're in a unique time in Utah's history. If you look back, open seats don't happen very often. And in 2020, we're at a unique time as a state where we've grown. I think people feel, as Utahns, some of the stress about growth and how we grow. And I think in an open seat, the more candidates you have, Glenn, that are qualified and are going to have this robust debate, and we're going to engage in that kind of debate, I hope it leaves the public with this understanding that there's a lot of work to be done. And just let everyone make their case to the public and let the best candidate win. We'll
get into some of those issues in a little bit, but first let's continue on with a couple of other things. One, as I mentioned, you knew what you were getting into here. You know the field.
I do.
What's your path to victory that you see?
So look, I think that it's not only is an open seat a rare time for the state of Utah, but having a crowded primary election is something that we haven't had before. So it used to be that all roads led through a convention and then two candidates would come out. So any candidate that wanted to win, it's 50% plus one. In a crowded field where you have 5, 6, whatever the number ends up being, you could see a number like in the crowded mayoral race in Salt Lake City, 25% be enough to win. And so what that means is that you have to have a base and you have to be able to draw support. And what I think, the reason we're in this race is we think that we have measurables, we've done some things that we can generate a strong base and then draw from that and then and see success.
Of those 5 that are in now, you're the only one going convention only. Why are you choosing that route?
I don't think it gets any easier when you just go to the primary. It's not horseshoes or hand grenades. That there's no prize for getting closer to a general election through a primary or assuring yourself that. I think as I went through the issue in my head, I could only conclude that if I were to get signatures, it would be because I was afraid I wouldn't be able to go through a convention and through delegates and speak with delegates and earn their support. And I'm just not one to make decisions based on fear. I think that if you want to be the next governor, I think you better be able to answer hard questions and really have these deep discussions that occur in conventions. I've done them before. I've always enjoyed the convention cycle.
A lot of people will say, hey, if you have the opportunity, you should do both. So we'll see how that plays out for you. Let's move on to your background. What have you done that you believe qualifies you to be Utah's next chief executive?
So I make no apologies, but I will agree that I'm misunderstood. I think for those that know my politics, they might think that they might have different opinions of me. This race, I want to introduce myself. It's going to be kind of hard on a personal level, but look, I was raised by a mother that was a single mom. I understand what it's like to have the power turned off. I understand what it's like to have your mother speaking to an angry landlord at the door and having to move. These issues that I grew up with inform who I am. And they inform the decisions I've always made as not just as a father or a business person, but as a public servant. And I think that perspective has, when it brought me to the legislature, I think that those are the types of things that I brought and that we had deliverables and measurables, Glenn, on issues that really seemed that no one could really find any traction for. That's the kind of heavy lifts that I think this next governor is going to be required to do.
When you talk about people misunderstand you, I want to get into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
During your time on the UTA board, at one point you were on the Inland Port board, but you resigned.
Yes.
People see that and perceive some of the things that happened in those areas as maybe sketchy business.
Sure.
That was a word used during this week by Alliance for a Better Utah after you had a major official announcement. So, answer that question.
Sure.
Were you involved in sketchy business in those positions? And looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?
No, the answer to that is no. We weren't involved in sketchy business. When you talk Alliance for a Better Utah, that is a left-leaning, that's a left-of-center organization from Progress Now. That's the national group. That's almost a badge of honor. When they're shooting at you, there's a reason. Here's the issue.
Just to mention, though, I have seen some Republicans say that, too, and I think that's something you're going to have to deal with in this campaign.
And it's fine. I would argue this. When you do difficult things, when you rattle the status quo, when you take on hard issues, it's hard. There's adversity, and there are critics. And many people tap into the cynicism the public has about public service or about politics. And so, yeah, I have battle scars and I've had accusations, but here I stand. I feel that I'm a vetted public servant and candidate, and we have not done things. And I would not run for a seat if I thought that there were things like that I was guilty of. I don't know what the interest would be. So we're going to hear those kinds of attacks, but I'm going to tell you, if someone's attacking and talking about another candidate, they must not have a very strong case to make to the public. It is an open seat. I think the best case made to the public about the issues that matter to Utahns should carry the day.
Let's move on to some of the big issues of the day. Let's start with growth. That's a huge one. We take a look at the population. It's exploding. A lot of issues with it. As governor, how do you handle that issue?
So first you got to know what the issues are, and I think that's not just going to happen overnight. So I think that the experience that I've had and being the Speaker of the House, but being in the legislature for 16 years, we understand that growth means your transportation and how we get around. We know that means the water. You turn on the water in the morning. That's not magic, and it's not a thing we should just assume. There's a lot of people that work every day very hard to make sure that we have water, and because we're a growing state. So water infrastructure is critical. Our emerging workforce. I'm a dad. I have kids that are going through college. I want my children to live near me. Hopefully they will. What if the cost of living continues to increase that prices this emerging workforce out of our state?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about that as a father myself.
That's right, and that's not a candidate or a reporter. That's as parents.
Right.
Those are issues that we have to start talking about more broadly. All I know is this, and I knew this as a public servant. There's no static here in the state of Utah. You're either slipping backwards or you're moving forward, and so the economy's changing. Things change. It's growing. These are conversations that a governor has to have with the state at large so that we know what those issues are that we're going to have to confront.
Okay, we've got to move on. Starting to run out of time here. Tax reform. The bill that was just passed in the special session, would you have supported that and signed that?
Yeah, it's a tough bill, and it's the problem I see with that bill. Look, I'm a supply sider. If we're leaving more money in the homes and the households of those that are working, I think that's good, and I absolutely support that. The problem with this, as I see it now that I'm out of the legislature watching from the cheap seats, is that it's called its very name, the legislative tax reform. You need a governor. Or if you're talking federally, you would need a president, where you hear about the Reagan tax cuts, or the Huntsman, who's another candidate, that tax reform. You need the bully pulpit and what comes with the governor to make sure that the public understands what these things are. The legislative branch, by number, is great for the heavy lifts, but without the understanding of the public, I can see and understand why people are hesitant about it.
So would you have signed that bill as governor?
I would. I think it's a tax cut all the way through, but the fact that that it's still something that I was trying to track or having a difficult time tracking as it was going through tells you that there has to be a higher understanding about the bill with the public, but that's a role of a governor to do those things.
Abortion. The state passed an 18-week ban. It got put up in the courts. Would you have signed that as governor, and do you think it needs to go further if you would have signed that?
I would have signed it. I'm pro-life. I would sign that bill.
Would you even go further than 18 weeks?
No, I let the legislature do its work. I would have to see what they would bring in to make a hypothetical. I'd have to see a little bit more of what they're talking about, but I support that bill.
Conversion therapy. We saw that play out during the legislative session, and it ended up as an administrative rule. Do you like that route? Was that the way to go there?
No, I think it should be a statute. I think that there was the opportunity, and it should be done in state law. I think it's stronger that way. I think it's not subject to change.
And you would support a statute, state law, that bans conversion therapy for minors?
I would. Okay. And I think that people have talked past each other on that issue. I think there's more agreement there than what maybe has been thought of.
Okay, got about 30 seconds. Public lands. Do you support what President Trump did with Bears Ears and Grand Staircase?
Not only do I support it, I asked for it. I came off the dais and ran the resolution asking the president to consider that, so absolutely.
All right, we will. This is a fascinating governor's race, I have to say that, and we will be following it all along the way. We appreciate your time, and we'll be watching as the race unfolds. Thanks so much for being here.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Glenn.
All right, still to come. We'll have more on the race for governor. Our panel will be weighing in on the field and what to expect as we get closer to Election Day. But first, a new law aimed at stopping those annoying robocalls, how it's expected to work after the break. There has been a changing of the guard in Utah's capital city. Erin Mendenhall was sworn in as the 36th mayor of Salt Lake City, and she's rolling out some big initiatives from the beginning. The new year brings a new administration in Salt Lake City.
I do solemnly affirm.
Former Councilwoman Erin Mendenhall is taking over the mayor's office with an eye toward building a more accessible city. She says all types are welcome to contribute.
Let's build a city that is a catalyst for progress greater than the sum of our parts, that brings people together, brings ideas and momentum to create new recipes for progress.
The new mayor says right away air quality is a top commitment.
Starting today will be the policy of Salt Lake City government to ensure the impact on our air quality is a consideration in every choice we make.
Mayor Mendenhall says city government can also do a better job at working for everyone.
I reach out my hand in earnest desire to join with you, in a sincere desire to work with you.
The new beginning signals the end for outgoing Mayor Jackie Biskupski.
It's really been an honor, and I love the work, and I love working with the people. We did amazing work together, and I couldn't have asked for more.
The former mayor says she'll continue to work as an advocate for renewable energy at the national level. She'll also continue to keep a close eye on some of the work she started as mayor.
I look forward to seeing what happens in the Inland Port case and then where we go from there.
Mayor Mendenhall is also setting a goal to plant 1,000 trees every year on Salt Lake City's west side. The TRACED Act is now the law of the land, and it's designed to stop robocallers from lighting up our phones. Washington correspondent Morgan Wright caught up with the FCC chairman to find out what happens next and how long it will be until the robocallers stop ringing.
With the president's signature on legislation designed to stop illegal robocalls and more authority given by Congress, Federal Communications Commission Chairman Ajit Pai anticipates the FCC will make a significant dent in stopping the problem this year.
It's one of the things that consistently has generated the most complaints at the FCC year over year over year.
Chairman Pai says the law gives the FCC the power to crack down on scammers.
It'll give us more time to go after the bad guys. Additionally, it would reinforce our authority to strengthen the caller ID authentication framework.
The law will require phone companies to develop ways to detect robocallers and directs the FCC to issue rules that allow phone companies to block those robocalls before they reach consumers.
Americans deserve the phone calls they want to get and deserve some peace from those they don't want to get.
Last year, Americans received nearly 60 billion illegal calls, and Republican Senator John Thune says no one is immune to them.
Scammers use these calls to successfully prey on vulnerable populations.
But Senator Thune cautions the bill won't provide an overnight fix to the issue.
The TRACED Act won't prevent all illegal robocalling. It's a big step, Mr. President, in the right direction.
While the law is currently in effect, it's unclear how soon consumers will see a change. Reporting in Washington, I'm Morgan Wright.
Coming up, we're getting back into the race for governor. Will Democrats register as Republicans to vote in the primary? What impact could that have on the race? Our panel weighs in after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to break down some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Senators Derek Kitchen and Dan McKay. Gentlemen, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here today.
You know, I've always wanted a Senate-only show.
A Senate-only show.
We keep getting the House in here and it just messes
Well, we have
stuff
former Speaker Greg Hughes earlier, but this part reserved for the Senate.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're happy to be here.
Let's get into the big issues of the day. Let's start with that one, the race for governor. It's becoming a crowded field. Senator McKay, let's start with you. Assess this field for us moving into the race for governor.
This is an exciting time, honestly, for Utah. It has been a long time since we've had an open seat for the governor. You'll remember the last time we had it, John Huntsman Jr. was the candidate and I guess was the governor and won that race. And then Gary R. Herbert stepped in when Governor Huntsman stepped down. And it's been, what is that? I can't remember, is that 16 years since we've had a gubernatorial race? And
here we have John Huntsman Jr. in the race again.
I say he's back.
Yeah.
Right?
So what do you make of the field?
I love this field. I felt the same way about the Salt Lake City mayor race. The Salt Lake City mayor race had a lot of intelligent, hardworking, committed, passionate people that would be a real benefit to the city. And you'll see, I now see the same thing happening in the governor's race. I'm excited.
Okay, Senator Kitchen, let's bring you in.
I think it's a really important point that it's been over a decade since we had an open primary, right? And so I was thinking about this in terms of what SB 54 from a couple years ago means for electing the candidates on the Republican or the Democratic side, and the fact that you see these candidates going out there and choosing to gather signatures. Speaker Hughes, former Speaker Hughes, choosing on the contrary, not to actually, and to go through the convention route. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how this difference in process allows them to sort of take different positions within the Republican field. And unfortunately, you and I were speaking about this earlier. But
yeah, I want to get your point on this because I hate to say this, but it is reality. The winner of the Republican primary is going to move on and be the governor of the state of Utah. So does that motivate Democrats then to register as Republicans to have a say in the governor's race?
Well, frankly, I look to people like my grandma or friends of mine that are either independent or registered as Democrats, and they all want to participate in electing the next governor. And I think that you see people like John Huntsman and Spencer Cox attract a lot of Democrats, or at least interest from Democrats. Whether or not they go through the administrative process of having to register as a Republican and then unregister is another story. I don't know if people are going to actually go through with that. So I think it'll be minor.
Do you see that happening, and what impact could it potentially have?
Research shows that that's only a minor thing. People chosen their party, they chose their affiliation, and they stay there in that lane regardless of that switch. But what will be very interesting is new registered voters, because we have a lot of people growing in the state, and how they choose to register in a very contentious race. Because you have a contentious race on the Democratic primary side for president, and if you participate in the Democratic president race, you will forego the opportunity to be in the Republican governor's race on the primary side. And so the ability to kind of pick which race matters to you most, it's interesting. I love it.
Okay, let's get predictions. Who rises to the top of this field? Who do you see rising?
I think it's Cox and Huntsman, for sure.
And I'm going to go a little bit different, and I'm going to say, because of the racist dynamics and plurality being what it is, I think it is Greg Hughes and Thomas Wright.
Wow, okay.
And the reason I say that is
but obviously
the winner's going to have 20%, 22%.
Right.
Right? That's the winner.
So you're saying you see one of those two coming out of the primary?
I see one of those coming out of the primary.
Okay, very interesting. We'll see how that goes. Let's move on to Salt Lake City, a new administration taking over there. What should we expect as we transition from the Biskupski to the Mendenhall administration?
Well, after the election in November, the transition had already begun quietly. And so I expect that what we're going to see is no real hiccups in the process. I actually expect Mayor Mendenhall now to continue to focus on things like air quality and transportation. Housing is going to be a big issue. So I'm expecting that some of the priorities are going to stay the same, but I think that you're going to see Mayor Mendenhall double down on things like air quality.
What about relationships with the state? Because we saw Mayor Biskupski have heated disputes with elected officials, particularly the governor. We saw the governor show up at Aaron Mendenhall's election night. We saw him show up at the inauguration and play the piano. Is that going to sour eventually, or is there going to be a better relationship there?
I think that this is why Aaron won. she won based on her ability to build relationships. I think that the inland port, no matter how controversial it was, the rank and file voters in Salt Lake City saw that she was willing to step up and get a better shake out of a bad deal for Salt Lake City residents, and that she was really leaning on her relationships. So I actually see that the next 4 years under Mayor Mendenhall are going to be really solid for Salt Lake City.
Your thoughts?
I hope it's 8 years. Honestly, I think 12. I would just say the Mayor Mendenhall brings an exciting, I think, different perspective in kind of getting things done. It always reminds me, you know, Salt Lake City goes through these political winds back and forth. At one point, they want to protest and be angry at the state, and then you get a protest angry mayor. And then everybody gets sick of that, and then they want a productive, you know, let's get things done type of thing. And it's always Salt Lake City trying to decide who it's going to be. And honestly, it's my favorite element of Salt Lake City politics.
Let's move on to tax reform, another big issue that'll continue to develop as we go into the legislative session. We have, in the two of you, someone who voted no for the bill and someone who voted yes for the bill. One of the big controversies there was how the impact it would have on education funding. We just saw the governor come out during the week with $292 million in new funds for education for a total of $4.9 billion. How does that bolster the argument on either side of this education development?
I think Governor Herbert is responding to concerns from the electorate at large that through tax reform that we're going to see a decrease in education funding. There's a lot of concern about the removal of the earmark for education in the income tax. I'm happy to see that there's a proposed increase for education. The problem here is that the voters in Utah, most people here in the state, don't trust the legislature to stick to that year over year. And so I think that there's, again, the biggest concern here is the removal of the earmark. And so I'm not entirely sure that the governor's budget will be sufficient.
Senator McKay, you voted for the bill. Do you believe education will continue to be sufficiently funded?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think the governor's reacting at all. In fact, I think the governor and the legislature likewise has always funded education as a top priority. If you look at the percentage of our budget compared to where it is, when you compare it to percentages of other states who have higher per pupil funding, we're always highest in the country. We're really close to the top of who prioritizes it the most. And so I think this is just continuing that trend. And I think if we had not seen a foundational change where we fixed the general fund, be able to pay for roads and have a diversified revenue source for the state, if we hadn't fixed that, there's no way the governor could make that commitment, because the money that the governor wants to put into the 4.5% that he wants to put in the WPU might not be sustainable when income tax drops if we have a recession. And so I think having a recession, those types of things are shored up now that we've moved the revenue around.
Your thoughts of that? Because that was a lot of the talk as in times of recession, but income tax, it is shown, goes down in time of recession as well.
Actually, I think Senator McKay makes a really important point that there was a.
You're not supposed to say that.
His point might be right on. There's a structural issue, and we have a changing economy, and so being mindful of that and setting a tax base so setting a structure out that allows for flexibility as our economy continues to grow and change. This is happening globally, by the way, and so to have that conversation, I think, has been an important piece of what the legislature at least tried to do. A lot of the voters in the state of Utah, and especially in my district, which is Salt Lake City, are frustrated with the process and the lack of input that they felt like they received. And now I know that there was a lot of input solicited by the legislature, by this committee.
But we could do more.
But it needed to happen. It needed to go deeper.
Reality is, this isn't over though, right? You're going to address this in the legislative session.
This is just one of the many ways that we're going to address it. Okay. But I think, Senator Kitchen, honestly, if you answer this, if we were king for a day of the state of Utah and we could write our own tax bill about how the policy would be, it would be different than what was passed, clearly. And I can honestly say, while I voted for the bill, it would still be different than it would, because I would just do it differently.
Okay. We're going to have to end it on that note.
Oh, darn it.
Great conversation. Yeah. Appreciate both of you being here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. The general legislative session gets underway 2 weeks from tomorrow. The 45-day session opens up on Monday, January 27th and runs through Thursday, March 12th. Utah is participating in Super Tuesday for the presidential primary. That is set for Tuesday, March 3rd. And then caucus night for Utah Republicans and Democrats is Tuesday, March 24th. Make sure to connect with me on social media. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues that are important to you. You can email me at insidepolitics@abc4.com, or you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Just log on and search Glenn Mills ABC4. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.